Like I said, we covered what we consider to be three very important challenges, but we want to make sure that we use the rest of this time to cover even more. So I have a whole wide range of material that we want to talk through before our time is up. And the first question is really to hear from you from a personal perspective. Adora, I'd love to know from you, when it comes to roadblocks, with regulators, what kind of challenges have you yourself and your team experienced? And what feedback did you receive from regulators? Was it useful? What did you learn that you can share with our audience?
Sure. Well, I mean, I would say that just kind of reflecting on the last few years, one challenge was during the pandemic, right? Obviously, CBER was at the center of the reviews for the COVID vaccines. And so they were very stretched thin. And gene therapies weren't necessarily a priority for them for obvious reasons. We needed vaccines approved. So there were many challenges there in really being able to engage with FDA in a meaningful way. Pretty much all requests were converted to written response only. I think we're coming out of that, but there's still a significant amount of meeting requests that are converted automatically to written response only. And when you have some, complex programs such as these, you lose the benefit of being able to talk through key challenges. And so, as I mentioned earlier, especially this will become even more magnified when FDA adds their over 200 staff, new staff to their system. And, staff that needs to be trained, staff that is not having the benefit of these live conversations to really talk through some key issues. And as the sponsor, you just get, sort of the written response with no opportunity for dialogue or to share additional information during the course of that meeting. So I mean, I would say that we are coming out of a period during the pandemic where interactions with the agency was really challenging. And based on those interactions, what we tried to do was, going through PDUFA, incorporate some opportunities that would help improve communications and engagements. And CBER has been responsive. I mean, they went through a period where they reached out to several sponsors to get feedback on some of the challenges with communications. And so within that, I was able to provide them with some feedback through organizations like ASGCT on those interactions. And the hope is that as we move forward, we'll start to see them implement some change in how they engage with sponsors, because I know a big pain point is inability to meet with FDA, with the team that is charged with reviewing your product. One recent experience was, in submitting an amendment, the reviewer and PM reached out and said, hey, can we just hop on a quick call? We want to understand, what you're trying to do here. And that call was so useful. And I know that informal interactions are sort of under attack now based on the Alzheimer's product that was approved under accelerated approval. But I would hate for all informal interactions to be lost as a result, because I do think that there's a huge benefit to being able to have a conversation with your reviewer and talk them through something and some questions that they might have in the course of their review that could otherwise, without additional explanation, result in an adverse outcome. So I would say, learning from that is, as sponsors, we should continue to try to engage. You never know what you're going to get or what response you're going to receive. It's sort of case by case and based on who your review team is. And if you're lucky enough to have someone that is sort of thinking outside the box and really wanting to help advance the product, and help deliver, these products to patients, they might hop on a call. So I hate to see that, be removed as an option, and hopefully we are able to continue to leverage that moving forward.
And in just a minute, as soon as because I want to pose the same exact question to Nina and hear her feedback from her perspective and her team's perspective. But we want to talk about the engagement with regulators and how early is early. So that's coming up. But first, I want to hear from Nina. What have you yourself, Nina, and your team experienced with feedback from regulators, and the good, the bad, the ugly? What has kind of happened so far?
Yeah, so I was saying same as Adora, right? Sort of that written response is a challenge, and not being able to have that dialogue is a challenge. But hopefully, with the resources and people coming back into the office and having more of that team dynamic in person will help. But I would just say, meanwhile, when packages are being put together, my recommendation is just to keep it very focused. Ask your questions in a very specific way so that you get your answers, rather than sometimes more difficult to interpret and not being able to have the opportunity for a follow-up. And so keeping, limited number of questions and keeping it really focused, I think is, in the near future, until we have that ability to have more of that dialogue, is going to be key.
Yeah, sure. And piggybacking on that, which is what I just said, both formal and informal communication, very important. Timing. We talk about this a lot, whether it's in manufacturing and certainly here, from a regulatory perspective. How early is early? When should sponsors be engaging with regulators?
Yeah, so as early as possible. I know that's not a very satisfying answer. I don't think engagement can start early enough. And I hope, with the Interact program, for example, they just haven't had the ability to get to those. And that is a program that had so much promise. If they had the additional resources, would be such an important time for FDA to provide that feedback to make sure that the product development plan is, heading in the right way, and especially for rare diseases where every patient counts, right? And so I'm hoping that we'll start to ramp up, and they'll have more time to not only accept those interactions, but to really invest the time into those conversations early with sponsors. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
For sure, certainly. And I think everyone on this webinar would agree with you for sure.